So, because of the Crusaders, Barbarossa is the highest ranking of them. He matches Saladin. The Crusaders end up getting the initiative. Position the forces. You know, it's kind of worrisome for Saladin's forces at this point. He's been able to place himself back in play at Damascus, but Acre's is at risk, and if the Crusaders make a landing there, there's a good chance that they can take that right away, very quickly, as opposed to the historical fact, actually. He's got a lot of forces spread out throughout the Kingdom of Jerusalem, or what once was, not, and maybe again. But he doesn't have a very powerful force lodged with him right at Damascus. He's going to have to gather troops in a way that he doesn't if he's on the board. Wherever he is on the board, he's got like 6 units, and he can keep them because of his high command rating. The Crusaders are regretting not having spent a card early last turn to get at least one of their leaders back. I'm not sure which one. One of the problems is they'd need someone they could play on the board, which would probably mean Guy, who's not bad, but yeah, he's probably the best of the pile. But I've got no one to command the interior Jerusalem forces at this point, and because I didn't get Conrad, that's kind of an expense that is working against me. All I've got is the Crusader leaders. They can pick up some additional forces, perhaps, but they've got mighty, mighty armies, and it may be enough to finish this off and deal a pretty heavy blow to the Muslims. Well, the turn started off with a real bang. The Crusaders played the 3-point Death of Barbarossa card, which means we're going to have to reshuffle. That allowed them to ship 5 units with the leaders, and they took Richard and Philip into Acre, dropped them both into place, started a siege. Great. Saladin fires off a lightning campaign, which gave him enough movement to slip by, getting through. There was an interception attempt, actually, by Richard, and driving up and back, or down and back up, striking Richard. Again, another interception attempt at Jaffa, just, you know, to try and get that extra +1. The actual combat, both sides were on the 17-25. Actually, I think they both had 21 strength points. The Muslims had this Christian impetuosity card, plus another, which gives them +1 to the battle, plus another 1 for attacking a besieging army. But Richard's a better leader, so he got a +1 on his roll. The die rolls were not equivalent. This isn't actually what it was. Were they? Let's see. No, they couldn't have been. The Muslims ended up doing, I don't remember how much, but a fairly hefty amount of losses, and the Christians significantly less. The Christians ended up retreating. They couldn't retreat to Jaffa, which was the only blank space, so they had to retreat through a fortress trying to get to Belvoir. That meant there was a pursuit roll. Well, the pursuit roll was very ugly and ended up doing enough steps to wipe out the remainder of the crusading army and capture both Richard and Philip. And it looks like the Crusades off to a really, really bad start. The crusading army is destroyed. There's still half of it out here, right? Some 5 Crusader units out here, but no one to lead them. Now, I've got Barbarossa, who's sort of almost as good as Saladin or Richard, but he's got his problems, namely this card, and also he's not as powerful. So it's kind of freed things up, and I think the Muslims can go up and try to deal with Barbarossa at this point, which they weren't really able to do with Richard landing right at Acre. Anyway, it was a risky move by both sides, I think, but the Muslims definitely came out far ahead on this one. Muslims then played the old man of the mountain to try to convert this back into being neutral, at least, It didn't work. They spent their diplomatic chit on it. And Barbarossa's moved up and started a siege of Marash. Now he's threatening Edessa, which is pretty much open and will be easy to see. Now what we see though is the penalty is getting higher and higher, so he's got to kind of take a fortress at least, and Marash seems as good as any other choice. Barbarossa moved down to Alexandretta and set it on to siege with the intention of bringing the additional crusaders in under that, looking at, well, we got to try to at least ransom Richard. Saladin storms up, grabs all his troops, and attacks through here. Again, Barbarossa is unable to intercept him, gets hit at a slight disadvantage, both in strength, we run these two columns, and the +1 for attacking a besieging force, yet he totally outrolls Saladin, ends up getting a major victory on Saladin, and then in the pursuit destroys the rest of the army. The initial fight, just like against Richard, isn't necessarily that big, but if you get the major victory, you can pretty much wipe out anything. The pursuit table is quite big with these large armies facing each other. Obviously, you know, if a much smaller army defeats a larger army, it probably won't wipe it out, but wow, impressive turns on a lot of luck. What we see though, Saladin got captured, but his two underlings are okay. So we're probably going to see Saladin also being ransomed off next turn. Of course, both Saladin and Richard won't be available next turn, but they'll be available for the final turn of the game. Oh boy. Crusaders make the somewhat questionable move of moving more troops than Barbarossa could command into Alexandretta, and then completing the siege with a lucky draw from the siege card. They might not have been able to succeed had they not had the reduction, or not been able to reduce the resistance factor. It was at about 3 or something. Anyway, that yeah, that's already cleared. So where are we now? Well, we're ready to demobilize forces, and the Crusaders aren't going to have to demobilize. Those are all pure Crusader units. This is now a castle for Antioch. This is just a Crusader castle. I can't use a power there that wasn't in the besieging force, but at least I can bring troops in for Antioch at this point. This is kind of an interesting situation. Anyway, we'll demobilize and see what ends up for next turn. Well, after setting up the troops, and there really aren't a lot to go on the board, crap. I want to get more on the board. I wanted to play around with those Muslim castles. Hold on. Okay, that's a little better. I've got some force, not really anywhere near the power that I need to resist Barbarossa's stack. My only real hope is to get the Barbarossa dies card. We've also exchanged prisoners, Richard and Saladin. The way that works is both players give a random card draw. Well, since they're each doing it and you don't get to see each other's cards beforehand, it just works that way, so it's not going to really affect things. Anyway, Barbarossa is the big monster here, but he's the only Christian leader. The Seljuks have sort of an advantage in the sense that they have two leaders, but they don't have anything that can oppose him. Maybe the best they could do is go somewhere else and try to take Belvoir or Karak, but honestly, they're better off probably trying to defend what they have. These big cities here, Antioch and Aleppo. Edessa they'll give up if Barbarossa wants to head that way, because that's not where the points are. The points are coming down the coast. And if he's not willing to do that, if he's going to go for the easy picking, saying let him, he's not going to gain, and Saladin's going to have quite a force when he comes on, enough to be able to handle this probably. We'll see how this plays out, but I think Barbarossa is going to try to plow through their strength because he is so much stronger. The problem is he has to do sieges and he has to fight his way down, and he's got to take things like Antioch. Maybe not Aleppo, but Antioch's worth 5 victory points. You can't just ignore that. The point limits on this, what do we need for this one? We need, Muslims have to, well, the Christians have to have 19. Right now they have 2. So they've got to really get a move on, and one leader may be able to do it, may not. Depends on how much is willing to surrender to him, really. Well, Barbarossa commenced the siege of Antioch, and he got the resistance factor down to 2 fairly quickly with some good card plays. But first of all, the Muslims slid down to where they can kind of interfere down here, grab some of that, and clear out the back end areas where there might be troops that would otherwise reinforce their enemy. But they also had this secondary defenses constructed, which increased the resistance factor as kind of a surprise thing. Gave them a card back too, and caused sort of a major failure in the assault, and now the value's up to 4 again. Well, the Muslims have laid siege to Belvoir, and that's not something the Crusaders want to see lost, because it'll mean a loss of their manpower in there. They've got bigger things to do than play defense cards on it, so it's kind of a painful decision to them. They've succeeded in taking Antioch on the next turn, or their next card play, which is a good advantage for them. Now their question comes to, do they rush over, take Aleppo, or do they just push down and try to fight their way through? Do they worry about trying to reinforce forces through? It's all very difficult to try and decide what the hell to do here. One good move might be they don't have a fast enough move to get their leader into Aleppo with those extra troops, and that's kind of a pain. I don't know where to go. Well, that's pretty much the end of the turn. Barbarossa managed to take Aleppo and move down one more castle. He was planning on just running as far as he could and taking the stream, but he got, well, I mean, he had to roll above a 1 to take a castle and above a 2 in order to keep going. He rolled a 2 and took the castle and stopped. We still got a siege here. We'll see what the redeployment is. I think I can fit this all on one video for the next turn. Well, the siege of Belvoir ended, and we got Barbarossa's army, Richard's potential army. He's coming back on. That seems like where I'm going to put him. Probably split up, send one force out to try to take Edessa and the other one down, but I'm not sure. Edessa's not really worth much. Maybe I can get a naval move and shift in real fast with that stack. It's really hard to tell. Meanwhile, Saladin's got a fair-sized force, but he's going to have trouble consolidating it. He's got to kind of figure out where he can put it. He can probably build up a defensive line starting in Damascus, where he'll start with troops he can pick up and maybe try to face Barbarossa in a showdown. There's a danger to a showdown, though, so he may try more to use that shadowing rule. Not to slow him down, but to hurt his forces as he approaches Damascus. Because he can give up Tripoli and Edessa. That's 5 victory points. That still puts the Crusaders only at 15. They need 19 to win. So they've got to take more than what probably Barbarossa can take. So yeah, we'll see. Well, all the pieces are down now. And we see Saladin has taken his secondary leader and spread out his troops, ready to move forward, try to do some harassing tactics, try to slow things down. Meanwhile, well, we'll see what the cards come out, because that's really what it comes down to. With some lucky plays, maybe Richard can come down and threaten Jerusalem or Acre, and that changes the whole scope of the game if there's naval moves available to them. In fact, even just a 3 card, it might be worth making that move down, because Edessa, it's only 3 points, and that's not enough to be able to do this. On the negative side, a card will only allow 5 units to come down, so he's not going to be able to cow any castles with a single play, and that's a significant negative aspect to it all. He's got 6 units there. I was looking at charging on to Edessa, but, you know, I just don't think that's where the points are. On the other hand, I don't think Barbarossa can get anything too significant in the face of Saladin. We'll see. Okay, so the Crusaders opened up with a Messenger Intercepted card. Now, I'm not sure if this is legitimate or not. They would have done something else if not, but it has a significant effect. So they used the event on the card. The way the cards are the way the naval rules are written, you can do a fleet movement if you have a card with if you play a card with an OV of 3, or by play of certain other events. Okay, but the question is, okay, this is an OV card of 3, but I didn't play it for the OV, I played it for the activation. Is that legitimate? I'm not sure. I said, okay, I'll allow it. Give the Crusaders a shot here. They got a lucky draw. They took the Corsairs away, which was going to be hitting Richard's army and reducing him by 2 steps. That's a pain in the butt for the Muslims. Now they're facing a little bit trickier situation. So, I think there was a siege play here, but Saladin used a Mujahideen card to grab some more troops, positioned himself then here in Tripoli, ready to face the Crusaders, and they swung down through, grabbed Hama through a surrender, ignored Homs when it refused, and moved on to Damascus to siege it. 8 points isn't enough. They're going to need 1 more. I don't know where they're going to get that. That could be Tripoli. It could be down in Jerusalem even. But they've got to win both these sieges and then some. And that sounds really tough to me. Especially since Saladin could just march up and take Antioch, perhaps, if he's got a good attack hand. Otherwise, he could try to break one of these sieges. So it looks pretty iffy for the Crusaders here. And after an attempt to take Damascus by treachery, where the traitor double-crossed them and they ended up making an assault at full value, that didn't go well for Barbarossa's army. It was sort of a last-ditch effort to try to make the run for Jerusalem, see if he can get the points. Well, the Muslims had a besieger supply runs low. It increased the RF, and it also caused an attrition that lost 3 more units. Things are looking really, really bad for those Crusader armies. The Muslims launched an attempt to relieve Damascus, but they got driven back with more losses than they caused. Actually, I don't know that they caused anything. Anyway, things are pretty good for Barbarossa in terms of that, but those numbers on the resistance factors are just too high to get down with the few cards I have, and I know a secret. Well, Barbarossa managed to relieve the siege of Damascus then on his next attack, and in fact, Saladin, and in fact managed to destroy Barbarossa's army in the pursuit. He got a slightly better roll this time, and killed Barbarossa as well. Christians drew for a random card to see if they could at least take Acre. They got nothing. They don't want to make an assault. They can't possibly hit with the rolls they've got. So now, all we have left are Muslim cards. And the Muslims actually were sitting on a truce card. What I think they're going to do is that they're going to actually launch an attack against Richard if they can. Well, Saladin had a slight advantage, and he managed to destroy Richard's army, but not kill Richard. Richard managed to escape with his high rating. But I'd say this is pretty much would be the end of the Crusader states. And of course, who knows, maybe Saladin would accept taking Jerusalem and Tripoli and allowing Antioch to exist back there with some kind of exchange, Aleppo for this territory. Who knows? Or maybe the historical situation will turn out where we have Tripoli included in that deal given to them. Well, I don't know. Anyway, that's the end of this one. And again, we see the huge effect of luck in this game. A lot of those combats really come down to, hey, if you outdice your opponent in a big way, there's not much that can be done about it. And, well, you know, those big battles, it doesn't come down to much more than that. And if you risk everything on them, that's what you're taking a chance on. On the other hand, it's hard not to risk everything on them, especially when you have an advantage. You're thinking, well, I can wipe him out and then do everything I want to that's good. As it stands, this is clearly a Muslim victory, although not as far as it was before the crusade came to stabilize things. I'll send this one up, and I don't know if I'm going to do the next one right away or something else. Probably the next one. I'm not sure.